enable a new share here. There we go. Sorry, just bear with me. It's great to see you all, and thank you for joining us. There we go. These images are becoming so known to us now. And when we picked up on the topic last week, I shared with you that there were two social fields that disrupt our thinking around this pandemic. And I was asked to spend just a little more time on this from one or two of you. And so really what this illustrates for us is that we're moving through phases of understanding of this disease, this virus. As we'll discuss today, this is not the only advent of coronavirus. There were predecessors to this. There was the SARS virus. There were other viruses, i.e. the Zeta virus as an example. So in the last 2 decades, we've seen several disruptors in what we term normal life. And what we've been exploring over these last couple of weeks is what is this new normal? And so we can continue to function in denial and strategic rigidity. We can fail to comprehend what this is. And this could lead to extinction or self-destruction. Or we can embrace this opportunity. We can look at this in the second social field through suspending judgment, seeing where we go, redirecting our efforts, sensing, letting go, presencing, which I'll talk about a little bit more, crystallizing our thinking, prototyping, and co-creating a new future. And so I want to share a number of words with you: acceptance, evolution, adaptation, survival, embracing, enhancing, and human-centered thinking. Images of this virus: business continuity. The world has been impacted. Social distancing. So where do we go? We started to pick up on the concept last week and the week before on the borderless world. We spoke about images that will become the new normal. We spoke about new business and new narrative. Today, there's a far more human-centered level of thinking as we discuss what this means for governance for this new landscape that we're moving into. And so again, today, I introduce you to a number of thinkers. What are the thinkers saying? And what are the new narratives that we need to be aware of? So our first thinker that I want to introduce you to is Director of National Domestic Workers and effectively caregivers. And her thinking is that the virus is revealing gaping holes in our care system. And here it is primarily a USA reflection, however, no different to where we are. Loved ones and sick ones are suddenly home from school. Meaningful child assistance is a massive gap, but there also lies an incredible opportunity. So what I've done today is I've explored the thinkers, and then I share some of the opportunities that I think business has in this space. Universal family care. What about a single public federal fund? What about care of the elderly? What about home-based care options and opportunities? She goes on to explore, what about people with disabilities? Paid family leave considerations. What about the concept that care is in fact now a shared responsibility? If you recall last week, what we started to explore was this interconnectedness of community. COVID-19 has brought this all into stark reality. Our thoughts on this matter: federal care as a business model. Who's actually thinking about a broad-based care system that actually starts to meet the needs? Because here's the thing, folks. If we think this is the last advent of a virus, we already know that countries are experiencing a second wave of this virus. And the second wave of this virus is a different mutation to the first wave. New Zealand, case in point, managed to remain fairly free of the virus, went from level 5 back into level 3. Rather, sorry, my apologies, level 1 back into level 3. What about professional caregiving services? The opportunities are endless. In discussion with an epidemiologist this week, this virus is a level 2 virus. A truly global pandemic is in fact a level 5. The Spanish epidemic of the flu of 1918 was deemed a level 2 virus, not different from what we have at the moment. Level 5 has far greater reaching consequences. So our thoughts are that there needs to be a policy framework, there needs to be national dialogue on how we will continue to build resilience in the face of these viruses. And so I go back to the sociology conversation right in the beginning. We can either deny this is happening and try and resume business as normal, or we can adapt and find a new way forward. Okay, so just bear with me. Just need to move slide packs. It sometimes does this, it gets a bit stuck. So there's plenty to consider here, plenty to get our minds around. Sorry, just bear with. Zoom sometimes does this, it gets stuck. But no worries, we move on. Okay, just confirming, can you all still see this? Christelle, if you can just give me a heads up.
Yes, George, we can see, thank you.
Thank you. Let's look at Steph Sterling, Vice President of Advocacy and Policy in the Roosevelt Institute. What this virus has done has exposed inefficient vaccine development globally, and we started to pick up on this last week. It has exposed a lack of spend globally on human vaccine development. I already highlighted that COVID-19 is one of several similar outbreaks over the last 20 years. Government response is an 18-month development life cycle on vaccine development. The world cannot wait. Russia has already jumped the gun here, has not gone through a detailed series of clinical trials, but has already released a vaccine. Putin, so confident about this, has in fact given it to his own daughter. Inefficient government spend has meant that the private sector has not been sufficiently stocked and funded to ensure an effective vaccine, and this in the research and development space. Private pharmaceutical firms simply will not prioritize the vaccine until profitability is assured. So we have a moral dilemma here in society. The private sector may need to lead this debate to ensure effective development of the vaccine. And a more resilient and pragmatic government approach will need to fuel the spend of the global vaccine development approach. So our thoughts around this, around business opportunities, is that there is an opportunity for a consortium of pharmaceutical choices in developing the vaccine. There is an opportunity for privatized healthcare in the entry-level LSMs. So typically private care has been centered around the upper LSMs. There is an opportunity to look at lower LSMs or entry-level LSMs. There are significant global participation opportunities. Private sector policy formulation of health impact companies and market-based incentives needs to be formed to meet the essential needs. And in bold here, the healthcare sector has been found wanting the world over. South Africa is not unique. Let me introduce you to a third thinker, Professor Zuckerman from MIT. Coronavirus has forced many institutions to go virtual, and we started to pick up on this last week as well. A sector that would benefit greatly from going virtual is government in all spheres. And here he highlights, in the American context, Congress. Medical and common sense necessity has brought this about. So here we have an opportunity for virtual legislative debates, virtual policy formation debates, virtual voting on issues of immediate and national importance. Virtual politics may have several benefits. The caucus of the conscience rather than party lines, the caucus of the people consensus of the democratic process, an effectiveness of technology over travel and expense, and quite honestly, the demise of unnecessary drivel. And here I'm referring to the broad political spectrum the world over. What this virus has taught us is that we need to be more efficient with our time. That there is a fluidity of the way we operate. Our thoughts. A more effective virtual governance has already seen the reduction of unnecessary expense. The rationale for heavy civil servant and political structure will be questioned in the near future. And the presidency is already more accessible. Look at the level of communication that has happened. Now, we could argue about the kind of communication we've received, but effective communication could be the result. Loads more to come. Let me introduce you to our fourth thinker, Professor O'Mara. University of Washington, government is already openly transacting with its citizens. Now, we could argue what that transactional relationship looks like. Communication is open to ongoing and immediate scrutiny. The level of instancy that has happened has staggered most technocratic and bureaucratic environments. Information is spread rapidly. The lack of investment in public health is now laid bare for all. And as we explored last week, the need for truth and facts is more and immediate now. It's a more pressing issue. So our thoughts. This could bring about the revival of local democratic discourse, national focus with local execution. The virtual world has created expediency on a level that we've never experienced before. As we explored last week, all the reasons for not doing this have actually fallen away. The question is, why would it not be done online? It's far more effective. The expectation of all government is expedited service delivery. Long delivery time frames simply don't make sense anymore. A new civic federalism is set to emerge. As we explored last week, pandemics bring about change. The 1918 flu pandemic, the 2019 COVID-19 flu pandemic. And as we've explored, there are more to come, and new ways of being and doing is required. We can sit back and deny it, or we can say, how do we evolve with this? How do we create a new normal? National leadership paradigms are being challenged left, right, and center. Local strength building to national excellence is a must. Private sector, civil society, local, provincial, and national government must join forces. South Africa is long overdue for a CODESA-type national dialogue that brings us all back to a common national identity. The author of The Death of Truth. Government can no longer be staffed by political loyalists, but by experts. The Japanese government is an interesting example here, where civil servants are not there by voter rotation, but in fact an established civil service, and then a government of democracy. This pandemic has taught us that governments lie a lot. The rules are nonsensical. The rules we used to live by are no longer appropriate. What about alternative facts? Or what Thomas Pynchon called in Gravity's Rainbow. He had some choice words which would not be appropriate to share in a presentation like this, but do yourself a favor. Go and have a look at what he had to say around truthisms and alternate facts. Governments have been exposed. They do lie. It's tough, but it's true. Multilateral diplomacy is the new order of the day. People are not as vulnerable as politicians would have us believe. Operations going forward with allies and adversaries is necessary, and public trust is crucial. A lesson from the 1918 flu pandemic: those in authority must retain the public's trust. The way to do that is to distort nothing. And I think you will appreciate that we explored this last time, that the facts around COVID-19, the data, the exploratory ability to research and to abstract the information is there for all to see. It is an open book. So our thoughts: new political systems are required. Democracy needs a new message. Truth, no matter how harsh, is an imperative. Social systems of care needs a new political advocacy. And if you recall, last week we started to explore the new social justice agenda. Drawing to a close, Cathy O'Neill, who wrote the book Algorithmic, who is with the firm Algorithmic Auditing Company, wrote the book Weapons of Math Destruction, O'Neill 2012, How Big Data Increases Inequality and Threatens Democracy. The aftermath of the coronavirus is likely to include a new political uprising. And here we're not necessarily talking about a revolution, as we would understand revolution, but there is an ask for a change in system. And so what we're exploring now as researchers and people who are interested in this topic is, what is that new system? What is this new socialism, capitalism system that potentially is emerging? The wealthy will have survived this, while the poor are marginalized and will be thoroughly destroyed if we do not do something. Multi-trillion-dollar bailouts can be mobilized if urgent, and if the cause is considered urgent. Whose cause? Who will be bailed out? The most socially disadvantaged are finally getting the message their cause is not being attended to. And friends, here, as South Africans, we need to ask very, very deep questions of ourselves. What are we doing as a national dialogue around socially disadvantaged communities? So our thoughts: policy is ready to be overhauled. National dialogue is urgent. Business has opportunities to reshape the dialogue. Political rhetoric is falling on deaf ears. The need is at the very base of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. A new social order is required, one which is planet-minded and planet-centric. Sonia Shah, author of Pandemic, Tracking Contagions from Cholera to Ebola and Beyond. Restraints on mass culture consumption is needed. For decades, we have sated our outsized appetites by encroaching on a closer proximity to wildlife. Fact. Animal microbes such as SARS-CoV-2, Ebola, and Zika have transferred over to human bodies. These are facts. The end of mass quarantine will unleash pent-up demand for intimacy. Fact. A mini baby boom. So our thoughts, given the change in consumer behavior, what are we doing about this? What are we doing in the space of product development? New social systems of care, new localized industries, new food chains and considerations, cultivating a new consumer culture. Business now needs to preempt this. And so I remind you of the 21 reasons. And as you know, over the 3 weeks, we've developed 21 reasons. The first 7 were agility, a strategic development radar of 100 years with the flexibility to evolve in 30 minutes. In other words, organizations that have set their strategies and cast them in concrete now have to have the agility to turn that business around literally in 30 minutes, i.e. new product development, new not yet known product development, real estate, new market principles, younger workforces paired with expertise. New wealth is data, new wealth is professional services, new wealth is local markets with global outreach. The second series that we explored last week is education will be free. New business models are required. The virtual reality market is a new market. Fluidity of thought, democracy, climate matters will take precedence. Never before has global warming had the impetus and the push that it has now. Medicine and vaccination will be a fundamental human right. Borderless countries, borderless markets, unregulated markets. Technocrats and bureaucrats have no idea how to regulate this market. Online commerce is highly evolved. Artificial intelligence and mode of household delivery, as we explored last week. Now, finally, the 7 reasons we've defined for this week. And I see members of local government on the line this morning. New democratic systems, virtual governments. New consumer demand patterns. We need to understand what this new consumer looks like. Mass consumerism is no longer okay. We're going to be far more considered in our choices, clothing purchases, the use of plastic, etc., etc. Product trust needs a new label. Local supply chain is the way forward. Corporate property portfolios need to be geared to retail and homeowner share schemes. Your big property development companies are all stepping back and reflecting on this. And if you recall, we started to talk about inner city urban farming, which the Inner City Partnership of Johannesburg is doing as an example. What does that mean for the way we build buildings? What about buildings that are no longer in use? How do we repurpose those buildings, et cetera, et cetera? Local markets, local support, and international patents. So I believe, and certainly research is bearing this out, that the ability to engineer and to bring new product to market has escalated exponentially, i.e. 3D printing as an example. So the world has fundamentally changed. And we're going back into local market conditions, local market reach, but potentially international patent modeling. So there's lots for us to consider here. So those are the 21 reasons. And then finally, I was asked to consider just what we're doing in the gender-based violence space, if you recall last week. And I've got some thoughts on this. Gender-based violence and the virus. The very idea of gender-based violence has achieved a higher public profile. Mental health awareness is receiving significant attention now, and we're seeing this in the field that we operate in. National dialogue has opened the subject to all. It is no longer a taboo subject. It is something that is foremost in the psyche of our minds. Root cause analysis is receiving focus. So why is there this pandemic in its own right of gender-based violence? And again, not unique to South Africa. The dark night of the soul is being brought into the light. The virus is the great leveler. The virus has brought about truth. The virus has forced us to confront our demons. And so our thoughts on this matter is high focus required. Education systems need to be sensitized to the reality. Early childhood development and a new focus needs to be concentrated on empathy, understanding, and tolerance. And I'm almost linking all of this together. We explored the concept of mass consumerism, etc. There is an opportunity here for a new moral rearmament movement. And this is beyond religion, faith, etc. It's a more values and an ethics-based conversation that we have to have as a national dialogue, but also as an international dialogue. And I've used the words intentionally in terms of moral rearmament. During the Second World War, there was a movement that was called the moral rearmament movement. And what it really focused on was getting back to the basic truth of who we are as humans and a value system that is centered on care, empathy, etc. And so friends, that brings us to the end of our 21 reasons. The talk has been recorded. All three talks have been recorded. It will be shared with you all. And so I think at this point, Christelle, Lizelle, George, I think we open it up for questions. And what we can do is we can do what we did in the very first talk, and that is from those who would like to speak, you're welcome to do so. Those who prefer typing up questions, please feel free to do so.
George, thank you very much. Again, lots of food for thought from your side, which is highly appreciated. I'm definitely going to ponder on some of the thoughts that you shared, and not from yourself only, but also from the other experts and opinion leaders. I'd like to start off with a question that goes to the first part of what you presented. The current coronavirus being at a level 2 and a real pandemic being at a level 5. Would that imply that from an economic point of view, and therefore from a financial point of view, there was probably an overreaction by national governments globally to the extent of this specific threat?
It's a great question, George. And so I think history is going to judge this period very interestingly. And that's almost why I went into the big data conversation and what data is telling us. So if we take South Africa as an example, so we know, because the truth is out now, that the first 6 weeks of lockdown were effectively to allow national government to get the medical plans and infrastructure in place. What happened subsequently, of course, is corruption. Some infrastructure was in place, some not. Give you an example. Our organization trains community healthcare nurses and auxiliary nurses. We trained 500 nurses for a field hospital in Port Elizabeth. So we deployed them. There's only 100 patients in the COVID field hospital built by Volkswagen. It's a 4,000 bed facility. So we have an interesting dilemma here. We've locked down the economy. It's had disastrous consequences, and the true unemployment rate will only be known, I would imagine, 6 months from now. We bought ourselves some time locally to get the medical environment COVID ready. Was it worth it? And I think that's the deep question we're going to have to explore. And I don't want to hazard an answer at this stage, but it is a very deep question. Was it worth it? However, what the lockdown has done is it has brought about the emergence of new businesses. The mere fact that we're having this conversation today was as a result of lockdown. So it's going to be an interesting period in terms of how history judges this. So I'm leaving it as a question mark at this stage. Sorry, George.
No, I appreciate that, and I think it's open to everybody to make up their own opinion, make up their mind as to whether it was right or not. I think our function here is to stimulate discussion and to stimulate those thoughts. I'd like to add on to what you're saying, but before I do that, if there are any questions for George, please type them up, and then he could read them, and we can take the discussion further. The one point that I do find interesting, and you briefly touched on it in your answer, is that within the crisis of COVID, tenders went to people closely associated with government and or the ANC.
Yes.
I do believe, looking at one of the other points where you spoke about conducting ourselves in an ethical manner, that this was the ideal opportunity for all involved to show ethical principles, ethical conduct. And the opposite was unfortunately revealed. So I do believe in that there's a significant lesson, and there's going to be a long-term impact with regards to what we experience there. So again, it's open to our audience to make up their mind as to how that actually went about. Mariana's got a question here. She says, what are your suggestions for alternatives to a lockdown?
So Mariana, I think it's a great question. And I think what history is going to teach us is that a hard lockdown doesn't necessarily stop the spread of the virus, but a change in behavior does. And so I think what we're going to find is PPEs are here to stay. So personal protective gear, it's here to stay. Sanitizing principles, working from home, decentralized offices, decentralized transport systems. So I think that's where we're heading. I don't know if we're going to experience, and please don't quote me on this, but I don't know if we're going to experience that same hard lockdown again. I don't know that certainly the economy can't manage it. It has not brought about the desired results that the ANC were hoping for as the national government. I think also, sorry, Alex, if I may, just to link this, and I'll definitely come to your question, the concept that Uchora Udoji raises here around virtual politics and politicking and transparency of debate, absolutely. I think that's where we're heading. I think we're heading to a far more honest system. And I think we're witnessing the demise of the current political system. I think we are witnessing the demise, believe it or not, of the African National Congress. I think what we are now going to be witnessing is the fragmentation of a dominant liberation party who has, in all honesty, let down its citizens. And please, I'm not advocating any particular political line here. I'm simply looking at this as a scientist. Alex.
Yeah, George, thanks for a very informal and very formative session again. Just my observation is on what you just spoke about a hard lockdown. In my experience, being actively involved since the 27th of March until now in the retirement industry, we found my observation actually, and I typed that out, was self-care precedes care for others. What I mean by that is, if we as caregivers, nursing staff, etc., we do not have that self-care attitude about ourselves, first of all, we cannot prevent others from getting the virus. And I can say, thankfully, the retirement village we have down in Port Elizabeth, which is quite a big retirement village. So far, we had no positive cases of COVID-19. And that is purely because I encourage all staff members to first exercise self-care, and then from there, you care for others.
Thanks,
We've had so many headaches here in the industry here where people forcefully want to come in and see family members, yes, but we have to have a healthy balance between care and showing empathy.
Absolutely.
There has to be that healthy balance, because loss of life at the end of the day is also, it's not good. So if you can prevent COVID-19, yes. So yes, I agree, a very strong lockdown is important, but one has to also be flexible at the end of the day. And that's the only way we're going to be able to save lives. So yes, it's not necessary to have a retirement village with COVID-19. That's
Thanks.
my observation. Thank you.
If I could, thank you very much for your comment. If I could link that to, to a question now from Len. How should we encourage and assist more home-based caring models of healthcare going forward that drives care to the patient in their homes? Len, it's a very interesting question. And I think we're actually going back to an older model here, where care was always administered in the home and hospitals was really, the exception. And so I think there's a business opportunity for caregiving. I think there's a business opportunity for an entry into the entry-level LSMs in care systems. And there are organizations that provide caregiving as a core business. And I think you're going to see the explosion of that far more. Thanks. And then there's a question here from Uchora. Do you think vaccines might help return things to some level of normalcy? Not necessarily to the pre-COVID-19 levels. George, sorry, I've kind of jumped the gun here by just reading out the question. I think vaccines will definitely help us to return to a new normal. But I do not think, and certainly research bears this out, that we're going to return to the same working practices we used to. I think you are going to see more flexibility in working practices. You are going to see the emergence of decentralized offices. And if we took a poll now and we said how many of you are working from home or working in a decentralized office environment, I'm sure we'd have at least an 80% hit. So the new normal is decentralized. The new normal is local, is best. Yeah, I think that's where we're heading.
George, I'd like to come in here. Fully agree with you about the new normal. A thought that has crossed my mind and that I'd just like to put out there, you referred to Putin and him having tested the vaccine on his daughter.
Yes.
Personally, I'm quite uncomfortable with allowing an expedited vaccine into my body.
Quite right.
I think there's a reason why there were extended trial periods with regards to high schedule medication, vaccines, etc. And in some way, I do think it might be beneficial to stand at the back of the queue when it comes to vaccinations. We might not be traveling the way that we want to, but I do believe that the potential risks and long-term negative consequences of an expedited vaccine might be quite detrimental or very risky to people in general.
Absolutely. No, quite right, George. Thank you for that. There's a comment here almost linking to some of the previous comments, and this is from Jill Humphreys. As an academic dialogue, how are these principles effectively and realistically conveyed to our disadvantaged majority? Does the new normal individual policy representation rely on entirely local voices? And Jill, it's an opportunity for decentralized politics. It is an opportunity for cheaper platforms of social engagement. It is definitely an opportunity for finding low data, high effective communication platforms. Because let's not kid ourselves, if we think that our socially disadvantaged communities do not have access to technology, remembering that Africa has leapfrogged the almost industrial revolution to fourth industrial revolution conversation. And that is that smart technology is available in local communities. Data is expensive. And so what we have to find as South Africans is a cheaper way to convey the message. But the dialogue is happening. It's happening. And for those, as you will appreciate, who are waiting for food parcels, those who are waiting for SASSA grants to be paid out, those who are waiting for government to help them out, realize that they've been royally let down. And so the dialogue is happening, and there is a groundswell of discontent, which we need to deal with.
Hi, George. I would like to link a earlier comment from Uchora with another comment below. Uchora said, and links with it just shows the interrelatedness of this all and what you've just said. Uchora said, couldn't agree more with the self-care, but virtual politics and politicking will certainly be more conscious-based and more transparent. Reaching out online and one-on-one engagement will bring the shady side of politics side to the open. And then linking that with something that I've posted here, the ethical leadership seems to be coming more and more to the fore. The importance of the ethical leadership in the workplace, in society, in government. It impacts on the gender-based violence, on the workplace bullying, on employee mental health or wellness, on community level, but on national level as well, the mental health. So the interrelatedness of this with ethical leadership, the importance of that is for me becoming more and more to the fore.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I was saying to a colleague of mine last week that I think, to quote a Hindu belief system, in karma, in that this is the great karmic cleanser, this virus. It has brought about an equality of debate. It has brought about a questioning of our value systems across this planet. And so ethics, the new ethics, and this is really, Martin, to try and link into your comments as well, around how do we combine and implement this international policy debate. It's going to happen. And any political party that doesn't recognize the groundswell of discontent, but at the same time connectedness, is missing a valuable opportunity here to bring about this dialogue. And I do think that as businesses and as universities, we should be pushing for national dialogue. With government, with business, there is an opportunity to host a new CODESA conversation here. And there are many national agenda items. But starting with Maslow's basic hierarchy of needs, survival. There are so many people who are just trying to survive. Gender-based violence sits in that space. How do we help people to grow beyond that? How do we help people to heal from that? There's such a great level of conversation that we could have here. Martin, just again, your comments, so thank you for that. A hungry person can't think the same way as thinkers. expect people to act. Hungry person is in survival mode. I absolutely agree with you. Fundamentally agree with you. And so what we need to be asking ourselves at a conscience level as a nation is, how do we meet that need? And so, as you will recall, a week ago, we started, or 2 weeks ago, we explored urban farming as an initiative. In inner city farming, inner city local trading, technology combining with inner city local trading. How do we unlock employment opportunities? This nation has to get beyond survival mode into actualization mode. And that's the dialogue that needs to happen.
George, I think linked to that, Martin van Niekerk also commented, and he said there are now so many thinkers with only thoughts of success.
Yes.
How do you combine and implement all these good thoughts and actually bring it into that national dialogue and beyond that into policy?
Absolutely.
How do we take steps to do that?
And Christelle, this is where I absolutely think universities have a role to play in academic researched thought on the post-pandemic environment and bringing about the dialogue. So again, this idea that business and government and civil society could come together and hold this dialogue. Because friends, we can't sit back and observe the demise, but not actually offer an opportunity to re-engage and to reimagine society. And I think that's where we're going. We need to reimagine society.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think there's another one from Joel. Ethical leadership is what everyone wants. How is trust built, and what oversight is provided by what body to keep it ethical?
It's a great question. Yeah. And thank you, Joel, for that question. Thanks, Christelle. So absolutely, I think there's a massive opportunity to re-engage on what ethics means. I think we're all watching with horror the unfolding of the corruption hearings, the Zondo Commission, and I think we understand that this is the tip of the iceberg. And so we are seeing the demise of society as we knew it, and we have an opportunity to rearm, i.e. moral rearmament, society for a new future. And this is where politics is going to have to work across borders and barriers. National dialogue is going to have to engage almost at the level that Nelson Mandela engaged this country at the start of this rainbow nation, a vision we all bought into. And it was a dialogue that happened across political spectrums. Communists and capitalists were working together. Socialists and business environment were working together. International funding opportunities poured into this country. And so I think we've got to get back into that frame of mind, and we've got to rebuild what ethics means for us. You just need to attend an ethics lecture. Christelle, and I'm aware of Martin Butler at USB, once hosting an ethics lecture, and you had to hear the answers that were coming out from students, MBA grads, debating what ethics means, to understand that we actually have a new national dialogue that needs to happen.
Thank you for that. We will definitely alert Martin that perhaps we should have that lecture as a webinar.
I think it'd be a great lecture.
Yeah. And thank you also for alerting us, again, that universities they have the infrastructure and the platforms to further the dialogue.
Absolutely.
And to bring in civil society, corporate sector, academic thinking around these key issues. And it seems that if the ethical leadership is coming more and more as a pivotal, almost mechanism in terms of all these issues that we need to take forward. And that is maybe something that we can work on, and we can try and arrange an ethical focus webinar as a build on to these lessons that's been learned.
Thanks, Christelle. And absolutely, Martin, I mean, just building on what Christelle has just said in your question, all of this can work if there's strong leadership. Leadership can only work with strong support base. Absolutely. What we have learned about history is that times of crisis bring about some of the strongest and most dynamic leaders. I would say watch this space. I think there is an emergence of new leaders. We're just not seeing them. But when the national dialogue is brought together, and there is this new CODESA on the new South Africa, the truly new South Africa, I think we're going to see some interesting dynamics in this country.
Fantastic. There's another one coming in, George.
Okay, this is from Cornell, and I would really appreciate the ethical leadership lecture as I teach ethics to master's students in the nursing department. Wow, what an incredible field to be in. Please can also have links to the first 3 lectures. Absolutely, we'll definitely do that. We've had a nice consistent base of folk who've joined us, and every week there've been new folk and other folk that have joined us. So absolutely, we'll put that out there. But ethics, definitely. I think, Christelle, I think there's our next lecture.
Yes.
And then I see from Jill, yeah. So strong
support base. Sorry. Okay, you go.
Strong support base can only be brought about by a democratic voting system. How else? Absolutely, Jill, I agree with you. So there's 2 elements to this, Jill. There's the democratic dialogue, which now needs to be ground-based, and it has to reach the populace, and a democratic system newly imagined that gives the individual voter the feeling that their voice is being heard. And this is where the Constitutional Court ruling on proportional representation has been so interesting, that individual candidates can stand in their own right within their own constituencies. So the whole proportional voting system is about to be reimagined, I think. So we're living in an exciting time. As a friend said the other day, what a time to be alive.
Yeah.
You know? Great. And then Uchura, big data as a weapon of math destruction. Please throw some light on this. Absolutely. So what the speaker was referencing is that the availability of big data and the availability of research. I mean, I think I mentioned to you last week, just in preparing for these talks, I was overwhelmed by the amount of information available in a very short space of time. COVID statistics, interventions in Norway versus Sweden versus Tokyo versus Johannesburg. The ability for the global community to collaborate. But the opposite is also true. And this is where she was going. The math destruction is the use of big data to sway a narrative that is not truthful. And so this ties back into truth, okay, and ethics. And so that's the 2 sides of the coin, Uchura. The good that big data can do, but the destructive nature of untruthful, to coin a new phrase, discourse.
Thank you, George. I'm not sure if there's any other questions from the room. You can just unmute and indicate if you would like to raise a last comment or a question or a suggestion to us.
Looks good, but thank you. I mean, thank you to everyone who's participated. Christelle, Lizelle, thank you for your support. To the alumni community, thank you. To all who've attended these talks, this has been great. It's been such fun. I have loved preparing this. It's made Friday morning such a pleasure.
Yes.
Besides the obvious reasons.
Thank you to everyone who's participated and who's joined us throughout this series. It was an absolutely amazing and insightful series, and every week built onto the previous week. It was really, really great. Also from the comments in the chat, very thought-provoking session, informative. I think, George, you made us think a lot about many things. And the way you've packaged it together was really brilliant, and bringing the new thinking of our participants in every week was really, really valuable. Thank you to everyone, and wish you a good Friday. We hope to come back to you with that ethical leadership opportunity. Thank you, George, for your initiative around this.
Such a pleasure.
It was great. I wish everyone a peaceful Friday, and we hope to hear good news over the weekend from the President.
Yes, please.
Be safe and remember self-care first.
Thanks, Christelle. Thanks, everyone.
Cheerio.
Take care.
It is